guys, it's Kaylee. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to do my weekly reading wrap up. So I'm going to chat you through all of the books that I finished this week, the books that I'm currently reading, and the books that I plan to pick up over the next few days. This week I've been focusing a lot on my reading. Obviously I've been home all week and I've managed to finish a total of 5 books. The first book I read was for Aussie April, and that was There Was Still Love by Fable Parrott. This is a short historical novel set both in Melbourne and Prague in the 1980s, and also in Prague during the Second World War. This story is of a set of twins, Eva and Mana, who grow up in Prague and are separated during the Second World War in their teens when one of the sisters has to leave the country. This novel is told from multiple perspectives and timelines. So we've got Ludek, who is the grandson of Eva, and he lives in Prague with his grandmother. We've got Malaliska, or Little Fox, who is the granddaughter of Mana, and she lives in Melbourne. And we also have sections that flash back to Eva and Mana's past, looking back at their childhood and at their experiences and what led them to ultimately be separated. This is a sweet story, looking at the lives of these displaced people and how their experiences shaped theirs and their families' lives. It discusses familial relationships, the idea of belonging, and what we call home. Although that sounds like something that I would absolutely love, unfortunately this one didn't quite work for me. Parrott uses a very sparse writing style, and I think this, paired with the jumping perspectives and the really short chapters, meant that I was lacking the character development and the emotional depth that I needed to actually connect with the novel. Because of the spare nature of the language, I felt that a lot of the history of the time and place went unsaid, and because I have quite a limited knowledge of what happened in Prague during this time, it left me feeling just a little bit disoriented and confused for a lot of the novel. I can definitely appreciate Parrott's skill at storytelling, and I think I will try some of her other work, but this one unfortunately just didn't quite work for me, so I gave this one 3 stars. The next book that I finished was from the Women's Prize longlist this year, and that is How We Disappeared by Jing-jing. This is another historical novel, also set in World War II, but this time in Singapore. This book follows 3 perspectives from 2 characters. So first we have Wang Di as an older lady, looking back at her experiences during the war. She's also trying to piece together the story of what happened to her husband, who passes away at the beginning of the novel. Neither Wang Di or her husband shared their stories with each other before he died. The second narrative is that of Wang Di as a young girl, starting in 1941 and chronicling her life throughout the war and throughout the occupation of Singapore. These sections were by far my favourite. They were engaging, brutal and honest. The third perspective is in the present day, and this follows Kevin, who is a young boy who on his grandmother's deathbed records her revealing a secret that she has been keeping all of her life about Kevin's father, her son. Kevin then goes on a bit of a mission to find out more information about this secret and to find out what his grandmother wanted to communicate. So he basically starts to piece together this mystery. I found the way that this novel was structured worked really, really well. In the present day, we see Wang Di's reflections on her past, but also how she has dealt with these things in her later life, and also how other people actually treat her after this has happened to her, as if the horrific things that happened were her fault. Kevin's storyline feels really different in tone, and it adds another dynamic to the story. I think his perspective offers a little bit of hope and lightness to the story. The ongoing mystery throughout the book of finding out what happened to Wang Di's husband, but also with Kevin's father, just really keeps the story going and compels you to keep reading. There is an overarching idea in the novel of stories needing to be told, regret at not sharing your story with other people and things going unsaid. We really feel the emotion in Wang Di as an older woman, as she's taken this story on as a burden throughout her whole life, never having shared it with anyone and bottling it up, and this really weighs very heavily on her. I enjoyed Lee's writing style, and although it wasn't beautiful on a sentence by sentence level, I think it really was compelling and readable, and it really resonated with me. All of the characters felt fully formed, realistic, and I loved the inclusion of some Chinese and Japanese words and phrases in the book just to add to the authenticity. I gave this one 4 stars. The next one that I finished was another Aussie April read, and that was The Lost Flowers of Alice Hart by Holly Ringland. This is a coming of age story, and it follows Alice Hart from age 9 up until her adulthood. The story opens with Alice as a 9-year-old, and she lives in an abusive household. She witnesses and experiences physical and verbal abuse from her father. She takes solace in spending time with her mother, spending time in her garden by the sea, and also reading books. After a traumatic event happens at the beginning of the book, Alice ends up living with her grandmother on her native flower farm. And this farm has been in her family for generations. Here she hones her skill and passion for the language of flowers, and she learns how to exist and communicate with other people in a world that she just doesn't understand. Alice definitely is not a perfect character, but I absolutely loved her. I loved growing up with her, learning from her mistakes and through her interactions and experiences. Ringland's writing style in this book is very, very descriptive and beautiful. She uses very sensory language to describe the world around Alice. So she uses colours, fragrances and sounds to describe the Australian landscape. She also uses a couple of repeating images to come back to a central idea, the most frequently used being fire and the sea. These images not only refer to the physical world around Alice, but they also refer to certain characteristics and qualities within some of the characters. The language of flowers in the book is used in a very similar way. So each chapter in the novel is named after a native flower from Australia, along with its meaning and how the flower grows. The flowers and their meanings then come up multiple times in the novel, maybe as signs in the natural world, and this allows Alice to read into these signs and understand what's going on around her, but also to understand what people's intentions are. For me, I felt that there was maybe slightly too many characters in this book, and aside from Alice, no one really had enough space or enough time to be fully developed. I felt that there were just too many threads all competing to be heard, and that the book was maybe just trying to do too many things. Although the writing style was really beautiful, I felt at points that it was just a little bit too much, maybe a little heavy-handed, and that simpler things like interactions between characters, the dialogue, and some revelations of secrets and information maybe just didn't seem quite as authentic as I wanted. This was a really immersive, emotional reading experience, and I absolutely loved learning about the Australian landscape and being exposed to Aboriginal history and language in Australia. So I gave this one 4 stars. The next book that I read was part of a series, and that is Shadow Kiss by Rochelle Mead. This is the 3rd book in the Vampire Academy series, and we continue to follow Rose as she continues her guardian training. The book delves a little bit more into the magical elements of the world, and we continue to discover more about Rose's shadow kiss ability and what this means for her future. It also broadens the supernatural elements in the world as a whole. We get the classic romantic tension, moral dilemmas, and crazy action that you come to expect from a Vampire Academy novel. For me, this one had a little bit of a pacing issue. I found the first half of the book to be a little bit slow, but then the last 150 pages definitely made up for that. I also found that the way that alcohol use was discussed in the book, and also the way that some of the men spoke to the women and treated them, was slightly problematic. With that being said though, I still love Rose. I love the female friendships in this book and the relationships between Rose and her romantic interests. And the ending in this one was fantastic. So I gave this one 4 stars as well. The last book that I read this week was an ebook on Scribd, and that was Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Laurie Gottlieb. This is Laurie's memoir, and it follows Laurie's story herself and 4 other people's interwoven stories. She discusses her life as she goes through quite a serious breakup and decides to seek help through therapy while she is also working as a therapist herself. We get quite an intimate look at her 4 patients' stories, but also at her own story as she looks back on her past and her experiences and what her therapist encourages her to open her mind to. Through Laurie and her patient stories, we can really see the benefit that therapy can have on people's growth and their mental well-being. This book is honest, powerful, and emotional, and it really resonated with me. I think honestly everybody could take something from these people's stories. Laurie's language manages to be both conversational and informal, while also discussing and explaining some important theoretical therapy terms. I definitely learned a lot about the field in this book, about myself, and it really challenged me to think differently. I thought this was brilliant and I gave it 4 stars. So those are all the books that I finished this week. I'm actually only in the middle of one book, and that is Dominicana by Angie Cruz. This is just the dust jacket. This is the story of Anna, who is a young girl growing up in the Dominican Republic. From the age of 11, she has the attentions of an older, wealthier man named Juan, who has his sights set on marrying her. Anna's parents are thrilled with this match because they can use it as a bit of a business agreement, and Juan and his brothers can build on Anna's family's land. Anna can move to New York, send money back to her family, and they can maybe all eventually move out there with her. So far I'm really loving this. Anna's character seems really strong. I can already see the fire and the courage in her. Angie Cruz's writing is really readable and fluid, and she writes in really short, sharp chapters, which means that you get through it really, really quickly. I'm only about 50 or 60 pages into this one just now, so I can't really say much more about it, but I will let you know how I found it in the end. In terms of what I want to pick up next week, I think I'm going to continue on with a non-fiction pick, and I am going to have a look at Jess Hills' See What You Made Me Do. This one is available on Scribd, so I'm going to read it as an ebook on there. This one actually just won the Stella Prize this year. That was announced just a couple of days ago, so I'm definitely interested to see what this one is about. It is a non-fiction look at the topic of domestic abuse, specifically in Australia. I'm also thinking that I might continue on with the Winter Night trilogy. So I have The Girl in the Tower by Kass Arden. This is a fantasy series and it is set in Russia. There is a lot of Russian folklore and mythology, and it's very atmospheric, kind of wintry actually, but yeah, I'm excited to carry on with this series. And then lastly, I would like to continue my Aussie reading and pick up The Life to Come by Michelle de Kretzer. I don't really know much about this one, but I know that it has 4 interconnected stories that kind of come together in the end, and this one comes very highly recommended. So that is everything for this video. Please let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. What books have you been reading this week? I would absolutely love to know. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!